On this month's video, I'm going to do a review of my weekend at Fully Charged Live South 2023. I shall start with a quick overview of the show, and then we can dive into my top picks of the show in detail. Some of these are probably obvious, and some of these less so. This year my daughter was also invited to take part in the live panel on the topic of Kids Can Change the World. So, full disclosure, I am somewhat invested in the event, if only as a proud dad. Let's talk about what we found. Good morning, it's day one of Fully Charged Live South in the UK. It's a little bit wet, but I'm here for the opening speech, which is being given by Deborah Meaden, and hopefully we'll get to talk to some of the Fully Charged Live team during the course of the day. Fully Charged Live South 2023 featured a huge array of everything electric and some almost electric items. These included a raft of electric cars, vans and pickup trucks, a ridiculous amount of EV chargers, which it just seemed like every other company there was promoting a new EV charger, a couple of companies specialising in EV vehicle conversions, including classic cars. There was home batteries, solar panels, e-mobility devices like bikes, scooters and one-wheels, community shared and funded energy projects, smart electric heating solutions, and indirect and direct electric water boilers. Let's walk through my top 5 pick of the show, and I'll warn you there's a bit of a theme here, and then we'll do a quick dive into each of them in far more detail. So, first up is Tapio with their electric zero emission boiler, or ZEB. This is a company that I've been following for a while, and a product that I may very well end up purchasing in the not too distant future. For those of you that don't know about Tapio, they're a startup who are building a new kind of water heater that's effectively a giant heat battery. Within the ZEB sits a slab of media that is electrically heated with either excess solar energy or cheap off-peak grid energy. This means you can intelligently shift your heating energy needs to cheap or free times. Next we have Herschel. They are makers of infrared wavelength heating panels. These are flat panels that you can hang on a wall or a ceiling. They can be freestanding under a desk or a similar location, which emit a lovely warming glow like you're stood in direct sunlight. Personally, I already have one of these panels actually under my desk here. However, Herschel had a new panel on display this year called the Crystal. This comes in a 600 or a 1000 watt version and can actually be flush mounted in a ceiling or a wall, and it gets much hotter than my current panel. The flush mount looks much nicer than the surface mount versions do, and I'm told the actual panel can get to over 300 degrees C rather than the 70 to 80 degrees C of my current panel. Third, we have Mixergy and their smart hot water cylinder. Yep, I know it's just a hot water tank, very exciting. However, the thing that struck me about the Mixergy was the maturity of their API and their app and the integrations available for it. They even have support for Home Assistant, so you can be super intelligent about how you top up and manage your hot water and your central heating. It is capable of delivering water at 55 to 80 degrees C and with quite high flow rates too. Fourth, we actually have a car, but not just any car. This car accelerates faster than a Formula 1 car, only has one seat, and it generates 2 tons of downforce whilst it's stationary. It recently set the Goodwood Hill Climb outright record at 39 seconds flat and is 100% electric. It's being developed by a startup, McMurtry Automotive, and their test driver is ex-Formula 1 and IndyCar driver Max Chilton. I was fortunate enough to actually chat with Max for probably about 20 minutes about the car and about the event. And finally, we have my skateboarding dog of the event. We have a company called Heater. This definitely gets Weirdest in Show award from me. The products I didn't think I want, and I'm not sure really anyone needs. However, it's so random, I felt the need to include it here just for its sheer weirdness. So let's all heat our hot water at home with other people's cloud compute workloads. Yeah. Heater want to strap a server to your hot water tank and use it as a heat sink to provide you with free heat. Yeah, let that sink in. Okay, let's start by taking a walk around outside the show.
Everyone here, it's just a really magical moment for us. So please, guys, come up on the stage. And that was a non-gender specific guy.
The event started with all of the presenters coming up on stage. They even had Elliot over from China and Ricky over from the USA.
We're very privileged to have Ricky Boy, who's come over from California, and Elliot Richards, who's come over from China to join us today. It's great.
BYD Dolphin, ladies and gentlemen.
After the initial presentation, it was over to BYD's stand for the European unveiling of the Dolphin. So the BYD Dolphin is billed as an affordable small car. Unfortunately, there was no specific pricing yet. I have to say, I kind of like the BYD Dolphin. It's got a nice interior, and I kind of like that the screen rotates 90 degrees so it can be portrait or landscape. Here we have the Genesis GV60. As well as BYD, there were many other car manufacturers, although there were a couple of large ones that were notably absent from the event. Other mainstream manufacturers included Kia, Subaru, and MG. Tesla also had an official stand, as well as the UK Owners Club, and Polestar were there. Polestar had a kind of twin booth set up. Going back to the Chinese manufacturers, Great Wall Motors and Aura were there. They had multiple cars on display. Aura had the Funky Cat and what we affectionately termed the Chunky Cat on their stands. Now, I'm not sure that the Chunky Cat actually has a formal name yet other than the next Aura. I kind of liked the retro styling of the Chunky Cat because it was kind of like a 1970s Porsche Panamera. Now, Kia had both the EV6 and the Soul on display. And then there was a whole selection of classic car conversions and fun little EVs. Now, this electric converted Fiat 500 Classic looks awesome. And of course, pride of place, right at the front of the show, was the Tesla Owners UK stand. Now, Munro were there with what I can only describe as an even worse aerodynamically designed Land Rover Defender, which seems to be single-handedly keeping the pop rivet industry afloat. Now, this canopy was actually covered in solar panels, and this unit is designed to charge EVs directly from the solar panels on the top of it. Also wanted to do a quick shout out to the team at Chargesafe, who have a rating system for EV chargers, which I highly recommend you go and check out. Now, there were a couple of concept cars at the event too, this Italian example being one of them. Next to it we had Lotus with their electric SUV. The fit and finish on the Lotus actually looked pretty good, but being a Lotus purist, this feels somewhat wrong. The Lotus featured pop-out LiDAR sensors and camera wing mirrors. It also had cameras front and rear as well, which the front one I'm convinced is going to be destroyed within the first week. I have to say, going back to the new Fiat 500e, this Abarth version does look quite cool. Although it definitely needs the rear seat stripping out of it, a roll cage putting in, and to be made rear wheel drive. There was also a whole slew of pickup trucks, and we had the Ford F-150, which is absolutely huge and is going to be horrifically unwieldy on UK and European roads. And right round the corner, the Rivian. Now, I have to say I was a little bit concerned by some of the build quality issues that we saw with the Rivian. I will say that the Rivian is significantly smaller than the Ford F-150 though. And here you can see what I mean about the build quality. Next up, definitely one of the most amusing vehicles, the Microlino. It's definitely giving off one of those BMW Isetta vibes. Turns out it's super spacious if you're 8 years old though. So all throughout the event there were talks going on the 2 stages that were available at the event, with tons of information around all sorts of topics, from kids can save the world through to vegan eating and cooking. There were panels on all sorts of subjects which were staffed by many different industry experts and veterans. And of course I have to include my own proud dad moment.
Kids change the world. So, any other thoughts on that?
Well, I found that it was kind of scary at school because they were teaching us about the dangers and the bad things, and we didn't really look at anything good about what we were doing. We were just looking at the dangers and how scary it was, and I feel like it just scares children and doesn't make them do anything. It just causes fear.
It's a really, really good point. And actually, certainly when I was growing up, I don't think the term climate anxiety existed.
And so that right there is why I'm doing exactly what I'm doing now. Let's take a in-depth look at Tapio. They are a UK-based electric boiler manufacturer. However, they're not directly heating water. They're much cleverer than that. So Tapio uses excess or cheap rate electricity to heat a block of media inside their boiler up to 400 degrees C or 750 freedom units, using a direct heating element. The media can stay at this temperature for days, only cooling as an air-to-air heat exchanger taps off the heat to raise the temperature of water flowing through the unit as needed. What this means is that you now have a 40 kilowatt hour heat battery in your home that you can use to offset solar excess or cheap rate overnight grid energy for heating and hot water. The unit's capable of a maximum of 9 kilowatts charging rate, 15 kilowatts output, a flow rate as high as 80 degrees C, that's 175 Fahrenheit, with a thermal efficiency average of about 87%, plus or minus 5%, although 100% of the energy goes into the home. I think this heat caching technology is fantastic because it allows for much more clever use of energy and storage of heat for times when you need it most. The cost is a little high at £6,000 plus VAT, with installation typically being an additional £1,200 to £2,000 on top. The only other consideration is that the unit itself actually weighs 375 kilograms or 825 pounds. Now, the downside here for me specifically is that it requires a hot water tank, which I currently do not have, but we'll get onto that problem shortly. Next, let's look at the product from Herschel that really impressed me. Herschel have been making infrared heat panels for many years now, and I have one of their panels at home already as an under-desk heater. It's really excellent. However, they have a new product called the Crystal. Crystal is a new type of heat panel that is more like a thick mesh. It comes in 600 watts or 1000 watt variants, and now gets much higher surface temperature of up to 360 degrees C. That's 680 freedom units. It will cost between about £700 and £1,200 and is 100% built and manufactured in the UK. What is particularly nice about this panel is that it can be flush mounted in a wall or a ceiling, and it has a notably better distance for providing heat at. The old panel felt like sunset's glow on your bare skin. It feels much more like a full summer's day with this panel though. The sun beating down on you. It's very impressive. Being infrared, it feels like being sat in direct sunlight, and it's very hard to describe the phenomenon, but it just feels really natural and relaxing. I'd love to have a load of these around my home. In winter, it would just feel like being sat in a summer's day. Genuinely a feeling I long for in January or February here in the UK. Now we get back to that lack of water tank problem I have. Mixergy. What I like here is there are many different size options from 120 to 300 litres capacities, and that the cylinder keeps a certain level of charge. For me, a capacity of either 180 or 210 litres would work, which with solar PV, immersion heater and a regular boiler, either the Tapio or gas, would run me probably around about £1,375 to £1,450 plus VAT. What this allows me to do is to tap off excess solar energy or use my battery to charge the hot water tank with extra energy and keep it warm. The Mixergy will lose heat over time, but only at a very slow rate, and this is much more thermally efficient than your regular hot water tank or combi boiler, which is heating on demand. This just adds another way in which you can time of use shift your energy consumption and allows you to take advantage of cheaper off-peak rates or excess local energy generation. The thing that really stood out for me here was the level of integration and maturity of their software. Mixergy have a full API as well as well-designed and laid out app. The machine learning based controls learn the schedule and optimize the cylinder accordingly, whilst there's also integration available for Home Assistant too, which I'm a big fan of. All this means that you can do some really awesome automations and juggling of energy and heat if you have excess local power like I have throughout the year. So yes, I met Max Chilton. Lovely chat, by the way. We talked about the car for about 20 minutes, and some of the numbers here are just utterly staggering. The car itself is tiny, only 1.5 meters wide, 3.2 meters long, and it weighs under 1,000 kilos. However, buried inside this is a huge electric ducted fan, which generates a bonkers 2 tons of downforce even while the car is stationary. With the car weighing less than a ton, that means it can accelerate to 60 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour in just 1.4 seconds. McMurtry also claim that it will hit 300 kilometers an hour or 186 miles an hour in under 9 seconds. It has a range of up to 350 miles. It can run at GT3 speeds for 35 to 40 minutes. However, it's capable of exceeding Formula 1 speeds, but only for about 5 minutes, which is about 2 to 2.5 laps of, say, the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. It is, however, more than enough to smash the Goodwood hill climb record, and it's now the outright fastest car ever up the hill at 39.08 seconds, almost a full second quicker than the VW IDR, which was the previous record holder. I love how this car goes back to basics, how McMurtry have really started from a clean sheet design and thought outside the box. This was absolutely my car of the show. McMurtry have partnered with My Energy, and for the show it was on their stand. So, heater. Definitely gets my award for the most random product of Fully Charged Live South 2023. The concept's a simple one. Data centers compute generates a huge amount of heat. So what if we could move data centers to people's homes and give them the free heat? I think it's a noble goal, but I'm not 100% confident that people will actually want this. What guarantee is there that heater in my home isn't doing something awful on the dark web? I'm not sure how comfortable I feel about that. However, it does seem Heater have thought of this, and their cloud compute scheduler will only allow for batch-based compute loads at the moment, so no real time. There's also no danger of anything nasty being hosted on my hot water tank. Interestingly, Heater also use their own dedicated fiber or 5G, 4G network to communicate with the unit, and so it does not communicate over my internet connection. So that certainly alleviates some of my privacy concerns, knowing that the unit cannot interfere with me personally or any of the devices within my house. Typical workloads for the Heater unit include things like climate modelling, medical research data processing, higher education research on supercomputing, and finance and risk analysis. So, there we have it. That was my pick of the Fully Charged Live South 2023 show. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I want to thank my Patreons, those of you that are in my Discord server, and my subscribers. If you have found this useful, please drop a like on the video and let me know if there was anything that I missed or that you would have liked to have seen covered. I probably did miss some of the things at the show, but I think I covered most things that were notable. Links to my Patreon and all the companies discussed here will be in the video notes below, and I'll see you in the next one.